I'm Rebecca Hawthorne, President of the League of Women Voters, Wayzata, Plymouth area, and I'd like to welcome our candidates, our audience, and our viewers on behalf of our hosts, the League of Women Voters, Wayzata, Plymouth area, and our co-hosts, the Crystal New Hope East Plymouth Robbinsdale League. The League of Women Voters is a 103-year-old volunteer nonpartisan organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in this forum this evening are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. It is our purpose in sponsoring such forums to provide you with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss face-to-face the issues that are important to you. This is a nonpartisan forum. We ask that campaign buttons or campaign t-shirts not be worn, nor signs or literature be distributed in this room. Please silence your electronic devices at this time. And now I'd like to introduce your moderator for this evening's forum, Patty Robles of Maple Grove, and a League of Women Voter Wayzata Plymouth area member.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight's forum is provided to give you the opportunity to learn about the candidates running for Senate District 42 and House District 42A and 42B seats. There is never enough time to cover all of the issues in a setting such as this. If your questions were not addressed, feel free to contact the candidate directly. Recordings of this event, whether in person or by computer, may not be used without the express written approval of the League. The League will only allow audio-video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by the media reporting on the event. The rules for this evening's forum are as follows. Candidates will be allowed an opening statement with a maximum of 1 minute to state their experiences, platform, and objectives. A question and answer period will follow the opening statements. The answers will be confined to 1 minute unless designated by the moderator. Opening statements will be given in alphabetical order by office being sought, and questions will be answered in a rotating order. A 15-second warning will be given to the candidates. The candidates will also be given a 2-minute closing statement. Candidates, please finish your sentence quickly when you see the stop sign, or you will be interrupted. No reference of a personal nature will be tolerated. A person's public record may be examined, but not their character. This forum is made available to encourage the voting public to focus on the issues and not on personalities. We ask that there be no demonstrations in support or opposition to the candidates or their positions, and that the candidate be allowed their full time to get their points across. The public has been encouraged to submit questions online in advance. For those in the audience, if you have a question, write it on a 3x5 card available from our volunteers and raise your hand to have it picked up. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Those that fall in the same general area may be consolidated. The candidates running for Senate District 42 are Paul Hillen and Bonnie Westland. The candidates running for House District 42A are Kathy Burkett and Ned Carroll. The candidates running for House District 42B are Jenny Cleavorn and Jackie Schroeder. All candidates were invited to participate in the forum tonight. Candidates Paul Hillen, Kathy Burkett, and Jackie Schroeder declined to attend. As stated in our candidate participation policy, we will proceed with candidates Bonnie Westland, Ned Carroll, and Jenny Cleavorn. We will begin with Senate. Can you hear me now? Okay. How about you in the back of the room? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. We will begin with Senate District 42 candidates Bonnie Westland to give 1-minute introductory remarks.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Bonnie Westland, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting all the time and energy and effort into this forum. I've lived in this area for nearly 5 decades, and I share the values of our community. I'm running for state senate to ensure that your interests and your concerns are represented in St. Paul. As your state senator, I will always vote to protect access to safe and legal abortion and reproductive health care in Minnesota. I will work to ensure an economy that works for every Minnesotan. I will vote to fund our public schools so that every child has an excellent public education. And so that our teachers can be paid what they are worth. I will vote for robust public safety funding so that everyone in our community feels safe, and so officers have the training and resources they need to do their jobs. Thank you.
Candidate Ned Carroll, running for House District 42A.
Thank you very much. My name is Ned Carroll, as you just heard. Currently, I serve as an at-large member of the Plymouth City Council. I show up to work for you, just as I'm doing now at this forum. My opponent is not. Let me digress from my prepared remarks and just comment about this organization, the League of Women Voters. Something that I respect, I've always respected, I grew up respecting it, and I think it's appalling and frankly disappointing that our opponents have chosen not to participate.
Thank you. Remembering our agreed upon rules about no personal.
Well, I disagree
Thank
with
you.
that. I don't think it's a personal attack, but I'll reserve balance of my remarks for closing. Thank you.
Thank you. House District Candidate 42B, Jenny Cleavorn.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you and good evening. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you this evening. I also would like to thank the League for holding this event this evening. The strong and trusting relationships that I have in the legislature over these last 4 years are critical to the work that we need to do for our community. Our conversations drive my work at the Capitol. When looking at the public record, you will see my good work in world-class education, in public safety, climate and environmental protections, affordable health care, and protecting women's reproductive rights. Good legislation requires calm, steady leadership. I work with our communities, schools, and businesses to navigate these complex issues and find solutions to meet your needs. The most important thing that I take to the Capitol is your voice. I'm State Representative Jenny Cleavorn.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with our questions now, and our first question will go to candidate Cleavorn. If elected, what would your priorities be for using a state budget surplus?
I love this question. Thank you. The budget surplus, first we have to talk about where it comes from. And do we have a surplus if we're not paying our obligations? That's the first question. The surplus came from many places. Yes, we did have increased revenues from sales tax and business profits, but at the same time, we had deferred medical care that our families on medical assistance had to defer due to COVID. We also had money that should have gone to our schools had we been able to have the normal rate of average daily membership. We did use part of the surplus to refund the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, and we also used it to give our businesses tax relief on the payroll protection plan money that they had. My goal for the surplus always is meeting the needs of Minnesotans.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll, let me know if you want me to repeat a question also.
Please.
If elected, what would your priorities be for using a state budget surplus?
Thank you. Well, To my knowledge, this is an unprecedented surplus that we have. And as is often said, sometimes it's more difficult to deal with a surplus of this size than a deficit. But thankfully, it's a challenge that I'm willing to take on along with my colleagues. So I think some of the things we should do with it are, 1, invest it, 2, save it in the rainy day fund, and 3, provide some tax relief to working families.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
Thank you. I would say that I agree with Representative Cleavorn and Councilmember Carroll that we need to make sure that we are providing the services to our community and to our state that need to be provided. I know that in the last session, there were a number of bills that were presented that would have provided funding for education. It would have provided funding for public safety. It would have provided funding for transportation, infrastructure, all of these things that we need in our communities, and none of that work got done in the last session. So I think it is important that we elect people to office who are going to go to St. Paul and complete the work of the people. And we should be investing in our education system. We should make sure that we are hiring mental health professionals, nurses, ESPs. We shouldn't be laying off media specialists because schools have budget deficits. We are way behind in infrastructure maintenance, just basic maintenance that we need to provide around the state.
Thank you. All right, question number 2. Candidate Carroll, you'll be first. The Minnesota Department of Education recently released student proficiency statistics for math and reading. 44.6% of students statewide are performing at grade level in math, and just over 50% of students statewide are performing at grade level in reading. As a Minnesota legislator, what action, if any, would you take to improve student proficiencies?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think we'd look at, for example, school districts like Wayzata. I don't believe they're performing at that level. I think they're performing way above that. And I think we'd look at them as an example of how to approach it, what to do. But that said, there's also a lot of challenges in some districts that don't have appropriate funding, that don't have appropriate resources. And so we have to come up with a plan to help those students.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
Well, I think that we know that during the COVID pandemic, nobody will sit here and say that we didn't see some loss in proficiency. We need to be working with all 3 school districts here in Senate District 42. That includes not only Wayzata, but Robbinsdale and Osseo schools, and work with our school districts, with our school boards, with our teachers, with all of the stakeholders to find out what we can do to help bring our students back up to being more proficient. We also know that all 3 of our school districts have operating deficits. And it is absolute malpractice for a legislature not to fund our public education system. So we need to get to work, but we also need to acknowledge that there has been some loss of time and proficiency due to COVID, which was nobody's fault. We had a pandemic that we hadn't experienced in our lifetimes before. I think our teachers did a magnificent job trying to help our students.
Thank you. Our next question, we're going to start with,
Excuse me.
oh, I do it at least once. Sorry, Candidate Cleavorn.
Thank you very much. And for the question, what would we do to improve student proficiencies, correct?
Yes, as a Minnesota legislator, what action, if any, would you take to improve student proficiency?
As a legislator, the most important thing that we can do is meet the funding requests of our district and to help our districts all across the state acquire the tools that they need to help our students. One of the things that I'm very concerned about is the fact that our class sizes continue to creep up one by one by one when we have these deficit years as we're seeing this year. Making sure that we are recruiting teachers who can fill the vacancies that we have in our districts will be a top priority for us. making sure that English language learners have all of the tools that they need to become language proficient would be helpful. Making sure that our special education cross-subsidy gap is not taking away from the standard classroom so that we have all of the resources we need to meet the needs of all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. For the next question, we're going to start with candidate Cleavorn. Many are concerned with increased crime, including gun violence in our communities. What legislation, if any, would you support regarding public safety?
Thank you for the question. So I serve on public safety in the House, and I have spent hundreds of hours looking at how we can reduce crime in our communities. And one of the did you say crime in general or crime and gun violence? Excuse me.
I'll reread the
Thank you.
question. Many are concerned with increased crime, including gun violence in our communities.
Okay.
What legislation, if any, would you support regarding public safety?
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you for that. So when we think about crime, we have what's actually happening and we have the perception of what's happening. In many places in our state, crime is actually going down, and the same is true in our own community here in Plymouth. Gun violence is something that we have to address seriously at the Capitol. We start with common sense things like background protection, background checks, and universal, and red flag orders to make sure that we get the guns out of people who should not have them and are a threat to themselves or to others. We also have to make sure that our police, we follow the lead of our police departments and our police chiefs to get them the tools that they need to do their jobs. We have a large recruiting issue facing us in the Twin Cities area, and we need to make sure that we have tools in place to make sure that we can recruit and retain officers. Thank you.
Candidate Carroll.
I missed that.
Thank you. As an attorney, I respect the Constitution, and particularly the Second Amendment as it's being interpreted by this Supreme Court. I may not agree with it. In fact, I don't agree with it, but they've interpreted it in a way that we have to deal with. So they've allowed personal guns by people as opposed to the militia. It's ironic given the makeup of the court and their approach to it as being originalist and textualist. That said, that doesn't prevent, like speech, reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on handguns and other guns. I would be in favor of that as long as it's consistent with the Second Amendment, because we have to do something about gun violence. It's ridiculous when people are using assault weapons, to kill people. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
Thank you. I agree with Representative Cleavorn that there is a perception and a reality. And we know that here in our community, we actually have seen a decrease in crime. Burglaries are down 31%. Vandalism and reports of vandalism are down about 25%. Fraud is down about 46%. I just met with our police chief a couple of weeks ago, and we had a discussion about public safety in our community. Having said that, there is still this perception that people do not feel safe. So we need to make sure that we actually pass a public safety bill. The public safety bill in the legislature in 2022 would have added more police officers. It would have added investigators to investigate and close crimes. It would have provided funding and support for victims of crimes. It would have provided funding for crime prevention. And when we talk about public safety, we have to talk about accountability for those who commit crimes and who operate outside our social contract, and we have to do crime prevention.
Thank you. Our next question, we're going to start with candidate Westland. Minnesota has documented some of the largest disparities between white residents and residents of color in the nation. According to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, closing these gaps is crucial to keeping the state's economy moving forward. What legislative policies, if any, will you pursue to address disparities in educational attainment, labor force participation, unemployment and income, and poverty levels between Minnesota's white residents and residents of color. And this is such a long question with lots of parts to it. I'm gonna make a decision that we're gonna do 90 seconds for each answer. It's not a whole lot more, but it's a little bit more.
Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, we know for a fact that when you look at things like affordable housing, that impacts Black people, people of color, American Indians, and other people of color in our community far greater than it does the white community. We know that in education we have opportunity gaps. People like to call them achievement gaps. They are not achievement gaps. They are gaps in opportunity for our students. We know that there are gaps in wages and that people are often working 2 and 3 jobs at a time, often as single parents trying to make ends meet. From my perspective, every substantive area of policy has to be viewed through a lens of equity. We have to be looking at how we can support and help people reach their fullest potential from cradle to grave. And that starts in our schools, making sure that every student has the tools that they need to succeed. That includes technology. We saw during COVID massive gaps between students who had access to internet, who had access to technology, who had parents home who were able to help them during COVID. We have to be looking at affordable housing. And in addition to looking at just the supply of affordable housing, we have to look at the things that make housing affordable to begin with. Healthcare that's easy, that's accessible and affordable. Living wages. We have to make sure that people have the ability to earn a wage with one job and pay all of their bills. Again, every piece of policy has to be viewed through the lens of equity to make sure that we are helping every person
Thank you.
achieve in our community.
All right, I'm gonna read the question again.
Oh, thank you.
And our next candidate is going to be candidate Cleavorn. Minnesota has documented some of the largest disparities between white residents and residents of color in the nation. According to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, closing these gaps is crucial to keeping the state's economy moving forward. What legislative policies, if any, will you pursue to address disparities in educational attainment, labor force participation, unemployment, and income and poverty levels between Minnesota's white residents and residents of color?
I will say that candidate Westland took my first words, which are every bill that we pass at the legislature must be looked at through the lens of equity. Equity meaning what will this do to those who are most disadvantaged. So in education attainment, we have to start with our early learners and make sure that they have good, high-quality pre-K available. I'm proud of my vote having 4,000 more pre-K seats available, with 300 of them in the Robbinsdale district. Education attainment also requires higher education. This past year, I voted for free 2-year college at our Minnesota State colleges and universities. That would go a long way to help families at the lowest economic ladder move up into the middle class. With labor force, we have wonderful state-sponsored and high-quality apprenticeships so that people can enter the workplace. I'm a strong believer in what I call stackable credentials. And those credentials, you might start as a licensed practical nurse, moving into an RN position. These are ways that we can help people move out of poverty. Income and poverty is something
Thank you. Sorry. Candidate Carroll, I'm going to reread the question for you.
Thank you.
Minnesota has documented some of the largest disparities between white residents and residents of color in the nation. According to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, closing these gaps is crucial to keeping the state's economy moving forward. What legislative policies, if any, will you pursue to address disparities in educational attainment, labor force participation, unemployment, and income and poverty levels between Minnesota's white residents and residents of color?
Thank you for the question. You know, that's a really complicated, involved question.
It is.
And not to punt the question, but there's not much I can add to what's already been said by these two great candidates. That said, let me just point out that on the city council, I've been an active member, active member supporting our efforts to fund and place a DEI coordinator for the city to help the city, the staff, as well as the community at large, be aware of these disparities and come up with solutions at the local level to the extent we can to address them. I would look to continue that with working with our colleagues at the legislature to do the same.
Thank you. The next question will go first to candidate Carroll. And if you want to set your clocks back to 1 minute, yes. I'll give them just a second to do that. Thank you. Candidate Carroll, how can the state limit inflation and address the higher cost of living facing Minnesota residents?
Well, that's a great question. Frankly, there's not a lot we could do at the state level. It's really a Federal Reserve policy. That said, there's things we can do to promote, for example, affordable prescriptions, affordable housing, maybe some gas prices with the gas tax. However, if we do that, it's going to be undercutting our funding of roads. So it gets very complicated.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
Yeah, I would agree that there are a lot of things that happen to deal with this issue on the federal level, but I will also say that there has been a considerable amount of price gouging taking place by some of our corporate citizens. There was a bill at the legislature in 2022 that would have addressed price gouging specifically, and unfortunately, that was defeated and that did not go forward. So we want to make sure that our corporate citizens are being responsible and not taking advantage of things like global pandemics. Again, we have to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to reduce the cost of healthcare, to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, to make sure that people have access to affordable housing, and to make sure that people have access to a livable wage where they can actually maintain their home working 40 hours a week instead of 80.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues here. Inflation is a federal monetary policy, and it's important that we have good relationships as legislators to work with the Fed so that we can have programs that work well for our state. I did vote for the price gouging bill in the House and holding the cost on prescription drugs, especially generics that are used often for reoccurring illnesses or chronic illnesses. Housing, there in this state, there is not one county where you can have affordable housing on one salary, one minimum wage salary. So that is something that we have to address, the cost of housing in our state. I did vote for a gas tax holiday, but it was defeated by my colleagues in the Senate. And then, of course, we have been working for a long time to get to $15 an hour for our service sector jobs, and it's something that we really have to do, and making sure that everybody has a wage where they can pay their bills.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with candidate Cleavorn. Given the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding Roe versus Wade, state legislatures may be enacting new laws regarding women's reproductive health, including access to care, contraceptives, and abortion. What measures, if any, do you think the Minnesota legislature could enact regarding women's reproductive health?
Thank you for the question. The Dobbs decision was one that caused all women to take notice of what is happening. I am a strong supporter of women having the ability to make decisions for themselves and keep the doctor-patient privacy there. We did defeat in the legislature this year bans on that would have allowed bans on IUDs for women seeking medical care. We have to make sure that women are able to make the decisions that they need, I would say that we need to, at minimum, codify Roe, which has always been a moderate standard for abortion.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Given the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding Roe v. Wade, state legislatures may be enacting new laws regarding women's reproductive health, including access to care, contraceptives, and abortion. What measures, if any, do you think that the Minnesota legislature should enact regarding women's reproductive health?
Well, I was very disappointed in the Supreme Court for overturning Roe v. Wade. That said, in Minnesota, we have a Minnesota Supreme Court decision, the Gomez decision, that continues to protect a woman's right to choose. And as a man, I certainly don't want to get between a woman and her doctor on the issues of reproductive health care and other health care. It's not my place, I don't think. I wouldn't want someone interfering with my doctor-patient relationship on some other issues. For example, prostate cancer, or issues of men's reproductive health. So I think that we should just look to codify the Gomez decision in state law, as well as promote other safe practices for women.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
Yeah, I'll just be really clear about this. If I'm elected to the state Senate, I will stand against any attempt to try to ban abortion in the state of Minnesota. This is a private decision between a person and their doctor, and we need to maintain safe, legal access to abortion in this state. We also need to understand that Justice Thomas, in his concurring opinion, I think it was, would love to take this even further, and he thinks that maybe we should send birth control and access to birth control to the states. He thinks maybe marriage equality should be reversed and sent back to the states. I want to be very clear that our rights and our freedoms are under siege right now, and we need people who are going to stand up and stand for the people in this community and around this state. Women are capable of making their own decisions, and we should allow them to do so in privacy with their doctor.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with candidate Westland. Healthcare costs continue to rise. What legislative measures will make healthcare more affordable and accessible for all Minnesotans?
Thank you. As a small business owner, I have to purchase my insurance in the private market, and I can tell you, I'm sure many of you know, it's not great. It costs a lot of money, high deductibles. We know that people are probably rationing their own access to health care because they're afraid of the doctor's bill, and we know that many people who file bankruptcy do so because of medical bills. We have an opportunity in our state to do something to help our citizens access health care, and we need to do it. We cannot wait for the federal government to solve this problem. They probably never will, to the satisfaction of people in our community. I support Senator John Marty's bill for the Minnesota Health Plan. Every person should have access to health care. This is a right. It should not be a privilege. Every person should have access to affordable prescription drugs, whether it's insulin or asthma drugs. I know that I, at one point, needed asthma medication that was $300 or $400 per month. I don't know anyone except the wealthiest in our community who could afford that.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. So healthcare is always a topic that we talk about at the Capitol, and it is this escalating premium, the escalating deductible, the higher burden that each family is being asked to carry year after year that does lead to many bankruptcies, and as candidate Westland said, rationing of care. I agree, we need to look at a single payer plan. Do we take Minnesota Care and make that a state-sponsored plan? Do we look at John Marty's plan, or do we come up with a hybrid plan? These are all discussions that are happening at the Capitol at this time. I support looking for a way that individuals can even have the same plan that the legislators themselves have. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll.
Thank you. As someone who's practiced in the area of managed care law for a long time, Something has to be done on this. As to the exact approach to take, I'd like to continue to study it and look at it further, whether it's a single payer, public option, or some combination thereof. But it's critical that people have access to affordable health care. I view it as a right, not a privilege. It shouldn't be necessarily contingent on your employment status. And if you don't have it, there should be public programs available as they are now. And that's the purpose of the public option. So I would look to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with candidate Carroll. Do you see a need to improve Minnesota election procedures? If so, what legislative measures would you promote?
Well, I think we're fortunate to live in a state where voter participation is very high, and in part due to organizations like the League of Women Voters who help promote democracy and voting, and I'd want to see that continue. As in terms of any improvements we can make, I'd look to Secretary Simon for guidance on that, but I think we're doing quite well on it, and I wouldn't want to see that dialed back. I think some of the people on the other side want to restrict equal access or access to the ballot, and I think it's critical we should do everything we can to expand access and voting participation, not restrict it.
Thank you. Candidate Westland, do you see a need to improve Minnesota election procedures? If so, what legislative measures would you promote?
We have one of the best election systems in the country. We have one of the highest voter participation rates in the country. We have paper ballots, so we have backup. And I do not think that we should be doing anything that restricts the rights of eligible Minnesota voters to access the ballot box. I believe that the voters should choose their government rather than candidates choosing their voters. We should be encouraging every eligible voter to participate, and some of that has to do with creating a system where people want to participate. And let's face it, our political system is a little hard right now. So we need to get people involved and active rather than trying to restrict access to the ballot box. The integrity of the vote in our state is high. There is no rampant voter fraud. That is a myth. It has been debunked many, many times, and I do think also that we need to be operating in the land of facts and not falsity.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn.
Thank you. I serve on state government finance and elections, and we have had robust conversations this year about the best way to go about increasing voter participation. But one of the things that we hear about a lot is cybersecurity. We need to make sure that we have investments in cybersecurity so that all of our systems at the state are safe and secure. We can increase vote by mail, especially as Minnesota is approaching an aging population. It would be a good way for our seniors to continue to participate. We can also do things like automatic voter registration. When you go in to apply for your driver's license and you're getting your real ID and you're proving your citizenship, when you become 18, you are automatically a registered voter. These are things that we can do. And our city, Plymouth, has asked for expansion of that time where you can go in and scan your own ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question, we're going to start with candidate Cleavorn. Legislative work was not completed during the last session.
Yeah.
How will you contribute to more productive legislative sessions? What are your views on special sessions?
Okay, one, as a legislator, I really dislike special sessions. We had, I think it's important to look at this cycle as a whole. Our goal in the first year is always to do the budget. That work was done. We completed the budget job and we had each part of government fully funded. The second year of the biennium is usually a focus on bonding. With the surplus that came available, there were all kinds of things that were now being put into the mix that are not normally in the mix. But I want to make it clear, the legislature did its budgetary job. With the surplus, there became more and more political conversation about whether it should be invested or whether or not we should give it in tax cuts. It's unfortunate we had many good bills that were there with agreement, bipartisan agreement, that the Senate
Thank you.
Republicans walked away from.
Candidate Carroll, legislative work was not completed during the last session. How will you contribute to more productive legislative sessions, and what are your views on special sessions?
Well, I was very disappointed that it wasn't completed, and as candidate Cleavorn pointed out, it seems to rest with the Senate. I believe the House finished its work, but things got bottled up in the Senate. And that's unfortunate. Plymouth stood to gain from the bonding bill that wasn't passed because of it. So it's being talked about in a special session. So it's a challenging thing. You can't make someone agree, but I would be willing to work day and night to reach agreement with the other side, with the Senate, with Republicans, whomever, because we're here to do the people's work, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you. Candidate Westland, legislative work was not completed during the last session. How will you contribute to more productive legislative sessions, and what are your views on special sessions?
Well, I would just echo what my colleagues said. First of all, you show up to work and you do your work. Everybody else has to do that. It is more than disappointing. It's been really detrimental to our community and the people around the state of Minnesota that the work did not that the work was not completed. I am a mediator and attorney. In my professional life, I spend a lot of time working with people who are getting divorced and family situations and helping them come to some form of compromise to move forward from their conflict. I think those skills are beneficial to bringing people to the table at the legislature. I also want to say that you have to have a good faith partner on the other side of the equation. People have to be there intending to do the work. We can have differences about policy, but at the end of the day, we have to do the work. And so that is how I would approach this. I would try to bring people to the table and come with compromise.
Candidate Westland, we'll start with you. Currently, there are 550,000 Minnesotans throughout the state who make less than 50% of area median income and pay more than 30% of their income toward rent. What legislative support, if any, would you support regarding affordable housing and rent support?
Thank you for that question. I actually had that statistic noted in my notes when we were talking about affordable housing today, because this is really a serious issue. And as I alluded to earlier, the issue is not simply on the supply side. We absolutely need to have an increase in inventory of affordable housing. But we also have to look at the way that we balance budgets. It's not simply on that side. We also have to increase income and reduce expenses for working families. We need to have affordable childcare. We need to have affordable health care. We need to have affordable prescriptions. We need to look globally at what we are doing to help lift people up and out of poverty so that they can join the middle class with the rest of working folks. And part of that does mean looking at how we can increase wages for people who we decided were essential workers. They were our essential workers in the pandemic. They got up and they went to work. They couldn't quarantine. And yet somehow we don't think they deserve a living wage. So I think we should start there.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. So we talk about affordable housing and rent burden. Rent burden is if you exceed 35% of your income on rent and utilities. That's what the definition. We have to, as candidate Westland said, do two things. We have to increase the inventory of housing that is available for the wages that we are paying in the area. Part of keeping wages high is allowing people to collective bargain for their wages, allowing people to unionize. To unionize has been the gateway to the middle class all across the United States. One employee cannot go in and ask for the wages they deserve, but when they can collectively bargain and unionize, then collectively they can get the wages for the wealth that they are creating for the corporate owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll. Currently, there are 550,000 Minnesotans throughout the state who make less than 50% of area median income and pay more than 30% of their income toward rent. What legislative support, if any, would you support regarding affordable housing and rent support?
Thank you for that question. Frankly, I'm surprised there are not more people. I've been working on affordable housing since I've been on the council. One of our proudest accomplishments was the approval of the Cranberry Ridge housing development, where there's 45 units available for workforce housing. So our police, our fire, our hairdressers, and other people of just modest means where they can live in dignity. I visited one like it in South Minneapolis. I was stunned about how nice it was. And I asked how long it had been around, and they said 7 years. The people who have that opportunity to live there take great pride of ownership in living there. So I'd look to do things like that. I've also worked on naturally occurring affordable housing to loosen restrictions in the city in terms of zoning to allow some of these older legacy lots to be subdivided.
Candidate Carroll, we're going to start with you first, and let's talk about the environment. District 42 includes communities that are raising awareness among residents about environmental issues, such as reducing nutrient loading to ponds and lakes to improve water quality. What role does the legislature have in addressing these and other environmental initiatives?
Thank you for that. As an Eagle Scout who's deeply interested in the environment and nature, this question resonates with me. At the city level, we've done a lot in terms of reducing salt runoff into the streams and rivers, and I think we had to look at doing some of those practices at the state level to reduce pollutants that go into the waterways and also cut down on other harmful effects.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
I agree with Councilmember Carroll. All of our bodies of water within our Senate district and probably every suburban Senate district and throughout the state are compromised in some way. So we need to be working with regulatory authorities to figure out what we can do to encourage the reduction in the harmful chemicals that run off into our waterways. And we need to encourage environmentally sound practices by homeowners, by apartment owners, by corporate citizens, and so on. So there are many things that we could and should be doing at the legislature around environmental issues, including climate issues. And I would simply say once again, our House members work really, really hard to put forward some really good bills, especially regarding climate, but also regarding water quality, air quality, land quality. And unfortunately, we know that good bills go to die in the Senate, and I would like to change that.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn, District 42 includes communities that are raising awareness amongst residents about environmental issues, such as reducing nutrient loading to ponds and lakes to improve water quality. What role does the legislature have in addressing these and other environmental initiatives?
Thank you for that question. So I serve on the Agriculture Committee, and I do a lot of work around water quality and soil health. We have to think about the nutrient loads, yes, salt, nitrates, PFAS. There are many things that pollute our waters. I have been very proud to carry the legislation for the Forever Green Initiative through the University of Minnesota, which helps keep healthy soil on the ground. It keeps nitrates out of the water, and it allows us to do cover cropping so that we can lower the Earth's temperature and have a productive crop on the ground all year long. We have to make sure that we use both a carrot and a stick, if you will. Incentives go a long way to help people adopt good practices, but then we also have to have regulation to make sure they carry forward with those practices.
Thank you. We're going to start with candidate Cleavorn. Taxing Social Security. Not all states tax Social Security benefits. What is your position on taxing Minnesota senior citizens on their Social Security benefits? Please explain.
So I am the co-author on the exemption, the unlimited exemption of Social Security tax for our seniors. I was not initially in favor of this because if you live only on Social Security, your income is too low and you will not be taxed. Listening to our community and to the people that I represent currently, I had a change of heart. It was very important to our community. So when I was approached by a member of our Minnesota House of Representatives to be a co-author, I said, yes, I will join that bill. So I am a co-author on the bill, and I will continue to work for the passage of that bill.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll.
Simply, I agree with Representative Cleavorn on this issue.
Thank you. Candidate Westland. Not all states tax Social Security benefits. What is your position on taxing Minnesota senior citizens on their Social Security benefits? Please explain.
It is not like attorneys to be short in their responses to anything, but I'm going to make a response even shorter than his and just say ditto. Yes, I think we should eliminate the tax on Social Security.
Thank you. We're going to start with candidate Westland first on this question. What is your view of the role of childcare in supporting labor participation, and whether and how the legislature can improve access and availability to quality and affordable childcare for working families throughout Minnesota?
Thank you. I have been a single mother most of my adult life. I raised 2 sons on my own with very little financial support. And I can tell you that one of the biggest costs that I had every month was paying for childcare just so that I could go to work. And we do have to provide affordable childcare for working families. There is an opportunity to provide some subsidies or additional credits, but we also need to make sure that we are paying our childcare workers a livable wage because we are entrusting our children to them. And oftentimes they are not making enough to support their own families. We absolutely have to do something about childcare. I have lived this personally, and it is one of the best things we can do to support our working parents.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn.
Thank you. I too support helping our families. Our young families are burdened by the cost of childcare. When you were thinking that you were paying somewhere, depending on what type of service you're using, $400 a week to $1,000 a week for childcare for one child, it becomes cost prohibitive very quickly. In the Minnesota House of Representatives, Carly Katuza-Watun, a Democrat from Eden Prairie, brought forward a significant bill which would have helped with child care grants. But like candidate Westland said, we have to make sure that the workers are being paid. One of the things that I'm currently looking into right now is to see where is the money flowing. Corporation A owns the property, Corporation B is running the service, and the money is not going to the workers. So I want to make sure that we know where those child care dollars are going.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll, what is your view of the role of childcare in supporting labor participation, and whether and how the legislature can improve access and availability to quality and affordable childcare for working families throughout Minnesota?
Thank you. There's not much to disagree with my colleagues here on the panel as to that. I would just add that I think it's critical to make this profession an attractive profession by increasing pay. That'll help bring supply into better balance than it is now. A lot of people are leaving the childcare profession because they simply can't live on it, together with incredible rent prices. I mean, so housing and childcare are interrelated. And so I would look to do what we can to help our childcare providers.
Thank you. Timers, if we could do 90 seconds on the next question. This is going to be our final question. All right, thank you. This is about the audit report of the Department of Human Services. Why, according to the Star Tribune, is this a long-standing problem? Lead editorial of the Star Tribune is previous auditor findings of 2018, 2019, and 2021 through 2021. What are your thoughts about the Department of Human Services and financial controls? And we're going to start with candidate Carroll.
Thanks a lot. That is a really complicated question, really complicated issue. I think that we just have to get to the bottom of what the heck is going on there. I mean, it's a huge agency for one thing, and there's been various proposals over the years to divide it up. It's gotten too big, some people say it's not big enough. But I would look at improving the performance in these areas and using the services of the legislative auditor to help out.
Thank you. Candidate Westland.
Can you repeat that again?
Absolutely. The audit report for the Department of Human Services. Why, according to the Star Tribune, is this a long-standing problem? The lead editorial of the Star Tribune is previous auditor findings of 2018, 2019 through 2021. What are your thoughts about the Department of Human Services and financial controls?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I guess maybe I'm daft, but I don't entirely understand the question other than I will say this, that every agency operating in our state should be operating efficiently. They should be operating and providing appropriate services for everyone in our state. I would need to look at the audit report myself to formulate some opinions about this, and I will say that I haven't looked at this audit report. But as my colleague mentioned, we want to make sure that all of our departments are functioning as efficiently as possible. If that particular department should be split up into separate agencies of some sort, I'm certainly open to ideas about how we can do that better. But sitting here today, I don't know that I can provide a real detailed response.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn.
This is a question that needs more than 90 seconds. I will just say it is a very, very complicated issue. Health and human services are 40% of our state budget, $20.2 billion. Think about that. And there are so many moving parts that are interconnected. And I will say that in our Human Services Department, they care for our most vulnerable, our most needy, our most in need of state help and services. I would say that we should improve the ability of the state auditor to be able to go in and have a look and do a deeper dive, and those are regulations that we would have to give to them. I would also say that it is very difficult to separate human services because so many of the pieces are interconnected. But whenever you are looking at $20 billion, you are always going to have some bad actor someplace who has abused some program. But the bulk of the work that is done through Health and Human Services is high quality, it is transparent, and the people are committed to making sure that those most in need are getting the services they need and deserve.
Thank you. I will now call on you for your closing statement, and we are going to start with candidate Westland. 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I want to once again thank the League for putting on this forum. I thank all of you for participating and for your questions. I know that my idea of being a good legislator is to serve this community. We are here to understand your concerns and hopefully to represent your voice in St. Paul. Paul Wellstone once said, it's one of my favorite Paul Wellstone quotes, but Paul Wellstone once said that politics is about the improvement of people's lives. And I believe that to my core. I have been involved in politics since I was 17 years old, and I'll tell you that was a very long time ago. But I have been active in politics. I have tried to remain as informed as I could as a citizen because I do believe, actually, that public service is a noble pursuit. And I believe that when we elect people who care about their community, who listen to their community, and who go to work for the community, that we can actually accomplish a lot of really great things. I am running for state senate to serve you. First and foremost, always. I want to make sure that we provide funding for our schools. I care as much about your kids as I do for my own and for my grandkids, and I believe that's how we have to function as a community, as a group of people who are part of a social contract. We need to care enough for each other to stand with each other in times that are good and in times that are bad. We need to support affordable health care for everyone in our state. Nobody should avoid going to the doctor because they can't afford to go. Nobody should go bankrupt because of high costs of prescription drugs. Last but not least, we didn't touch on this, but I do support gun violence prevention measures in our state senate, and I will do everything I can to help keep our community safe.
Thank you. Candidate Cleavorn.
Thank you. Again, I would like to thank the League and the City of Plymouth for providing this forum. But most importantly, I'd like to thank you, the people who came this evening to listen and to offer your hard questions. Democracy is often messy, but the vast majority of issues do not fall along party lines. The strength of our democracy depends on informed citizens exercising your right to vote. I am a committed representative who understands the complexities before us and the interconnectedness of the multitude of concerns. I'm very proud of my public record and the hard work that I have done as your representative. Our conversations drive my work at the Capitol. In Medicine Lake, in Plymouth, we pay our fair share and we care for our neighbors. I'm often asked, how do we get past the ugliness of today's politics? We fix this by working together with mutual respect. At the end of the day, most of us want the same things: a good job, a safe home, excellent education, and autonomy and privacy to make our own health care decisions. Being a state representative requires honoring all voices and building trusting relationships. This is hard work, listening and respecting opposing views, honoring the dignity of each and every person. It's about being present. Hearing opposing views is sometimes uncomfortable, but that's the space where we grow and find solutions. Being a state representative is about showing up, not only at the Capitol, but at events like this, listening and answering your questions.
Thank you. Candidate Carroll.
Thank you. As you know, currently I serve as an at-large member of the Plymouth City Council. We've talked about that. I show up and work for you, just like I'm doing now. In fact, on the council, I don't believe I've missed a single meeting over 8 years. There might have been one, but I haven't checked the records. But to my recollection, I haven't. It's been a privilege and honor to serve on the City Council, and I look forward to continuing my service at the Minnesota House of Representatives in a new open seat that became open due to redistricting. During my time in the council, I have focused on public safety, infrastructure, housing, environment, and public health. At the legislature, I will look to do the same and add in the critically important issue of education. On the council, we don't have to deal with education. They do at the legislature. I'm prepared for this seat by serving on the Plymouth City Council, along with my professional background as an attorney, and educational degrees in economics, political science, and a graduate degree in public policy analysis. I'm prepared for it having served as a legislative assistant in Washington, D.C., and I'm prepared for it based on my experience working with our legislators, such as Representative Cleavorn, on issues of importance to our district, like bonding. I ask for your support and vote for Ned Carroll for Minnesota House. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the Senate District 42, House District 42A, and 42B candidate forum. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I thank the candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and for being willing to serve our community. Audience, please join me in thanking the candidates with your applause. Thank you also to the League of Women Voter volunteers, our audience here, and those viewing this event virtually, and for your participation in this candidate forum. Thank you to the Plymouth City staff for supporting this event, and CCX Media for broadcasting live streaming, and recording tonight's forum. On-demand viewing can be accessed at lwvwpa.org. For additional election information, we encourage you to visit vote411.org, the League of Women Voters award-winning one-stop shop where voters can register to vote, find their polling place, and learn how candidates stand on issues. Please remember to vote in the November 8th election by absentee ballot or in person. Your vote is your voice. League of Women Voters welcomes new members, both men and women, at lwvwpa.org. Thank you and good night.